My name is Margaret Delaney, and I was 67 years old when the ground quietly shifted beneath my feet. I had spent the better part of my later years believing life had settled into something predictable, a gentle rhythm of morning tea, gardening, and occasional dinners with my son, Ethan, and his wife, Julia. Predictability felt safe, comfortable, earned. I lived in a modest but warm cottage on the outskirts of Knoxville, the kind of place where neighbors still waved and the breeze carried the smell of pine. After losing my husband 12 years earlier, the silence of the house had been jarring at first, then healing, then finally mine. I had rebuilt my world through slow, deliberate routines. And truthfully, I thought I understood my relationships well enough, especially with my daughter-in-law. Julia was clever, charming, the type of person who knew how to turn a compliment into currency. She had a polished stillness about her, like a woman who studied herself in every reflective surface. I never fully relaxed around her, but for my son's sake, I tried. I believe most mothers keep a quiet reservoir of grace for their children's partners. I certainly did. Then came the call about my late sister's estate. My sister, Lorraine, had been a brilliant academic who never married and never had children. We had been close, despite our differences. Her passing left an ache I could not quite name. But the shock came not from her death, that had been expected, but from the inheritance she left me, $310,000, the proceeds from selling the townhouse she cherished for decades. For the first time in many years, I felt a new kind of security. Not wealth. Not luxury. Just breathing room. A cushion for medical care, home repairs, and perhaps, finally, a small art studio. I wanted nothing extravagant. Just a corner of the world that felt like mine. But when I shared this news with Ethan and Julia one evening over dinner, I noticed something shift. Ethan hugged me, thrilled for me. But Julia, she froze for half a second. Her eyes flickered, not with excitement, not with warmth, but with calculation. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. The kind of expression someone wears when their mind leaps 5 steps ahead, crafting a plan before they've even swallowed their sip of wine. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking it. She was probably just surprised. Except the next week, she started dropping hints. "You know, Mom," she said one afternoon, "the house really needs some upgrades if you're ever going to stay with us long term. And wouldn't it be safer for you to live closer to us?" I had no plans to move in. I valued my independence. And I said exactly that. Still, she persisted. "It would increase the home value for the whole family," she said. "Think of it as an investment." Her words clung to me like burrs. But what I did not know, what I could not know, was that this was only the beginning. A quiet, creeping shift in the shadows. A change in tone. A plan forming just beyond sight. I had no idea how far she would go. And I had no idea that soon, the home my son thought he owned would legally, and unexpectedly, belong to me. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's a signature. What exactly are Julia and Ethan planning? It started with a phone call from the bank. "Mrs. Delaney, we're just confirming the transfer request you placed this morning." I nearly dropped the mug in my hands. Transfer? What transfer? "Yes," the representative continued politely. "The funds from your inheritance account are being moved into the Delaney Family Renovation Fund. We have the authorization form signed and notarized." A quiet chill ran up my spine. "I didn't authorize anything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a pause, brief but heavy. "Ma'am, the paperwork has your signature." I ended the call quickly, heart thudding in my chest. The first thing I did was log into my account. I felt my breath leave me all at once. $310,000 gone. Every dollar. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. No, this had to be a mistake. A glitch. Something explainable. But I knew it wasn't. Because earlier that week, Julia had been unusually cheerful. She brought me flowers, just because. She invited me to dinner twice. She even asked for my favorite recipes to connect more deeply. All the while, she was draining my inheritance. I searched through my email and found a message supposedly from me, sent to the bank, confirming the transfer. Only I hadn't written it. The tone was wrong. The phrasing stiff. And the signature block wasn't mine. An hour later, Ethan called. "Mom, great news," he said brightly. "The renovation plans were approved. We're finally going to get the house updated. Julia showed me the paperwork you signed. Thank you for helping us do this. It means the world." My stomach twisted. "What paperwork, Ethan?" He hesitated. "The authorization. For the inheritance funds. Julia said you agreed to invest in the renovation for your future suite." I closed my eyes. I never agreed to anything. Silence. A long, brutal silence. "Mom," he finally said, "Julia showed me the documents. I saw your signature." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "Ethan, I didn't sign anything." Another pause. A shift in his breathing. "Are you sure you're remembering right?" he asked gently. Too gently. The implication stung. Julia had already planted a seed. That my memory was slipping. That I was overwhelmed. That maybe I wasn't keeping track of finances well. She had tailored her lie with precision. But I was not confused. I was not forgetful. And I was not going to let this go. Before I replied, I heard a voice in the background, Julia's, whispering something to him. Something urgent. Ethan lowered his voice. "Mom, I'll call you later." And the line went dead. I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the peaceful life I'd built. For a moment, I felt small, betrayed, used. Like a lifetime of dignity had been tossed aside for the convenience of a woman who had always looked at my independence like it was an inconvenience. But beneath the hurt, something else sparked. A heat. A sharpness I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. I was a woman who had built a life from the ground up. A woman who had buried a husband, raised a child, and navigated tragedy with grace. If they thought I would crumble quietly, they didn't know me at all. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. How will Margaret begin uncovering the truth behind the forged documents? To understand the depth of this betrayal, you'd need to know a bit about my family history. I grew up in a house where money was discussed in hushed tones. My parents had seen hunger during their childhoods. They believed fiercely in documentation, boundaries, and living within one's means. I inherited that practicality. My sister, Lorraine, inherited the love of books and teaching. Neither of us were reckless with finances. We learned early that independence was freedom. But Ethan married into a different culture entirely. Julia's family flaunted wealth the way some people flaunt humor. Vacations were posted daily, purchases displayed online like trophies, and every improvement to their home was documented in immaculate detail. Her mother used investment the way other people used please. Julia wasn't evil. She wasn't cruel. She was simply raised to believe that the world owed her convenience, and that wealth was a tool you acquired however you could. I never felt like she saw me as family. More like a stepping stone to stability. A rung on a ladder she believed she deserved to climb. For years, I tried to ignore the small things. The pointed comments about my home being outdated. The implication that I couldn't live alone forever. The way she called me sweetie in a tone that felt condescending. None of it was overtly hostile. But it was the drip of disrespect that wears away stone. Then there was Ethan, my gentle, eager-to-please son. He adored Julia. He wanted her happiness more than anything. And that made him blind to her manipulations. It was easier for him to assume misunderstandings than malice. But now my inheritance, my safety net, my late sister's final gift, was gone. And the speed at which it disappeared told me something important. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was a plan years in the making. I started recalling little moments that now felt like clues. Like the time Julia asked casually, "Do you have a will? We just want to make sure everything's organized." Or when she insisted on helping me manage my paperwork last Christmas. Or when she urged me repeatedly to consider consolidating accounts. At the time, I thought she was being helpful. Now I saw it for what it was. Preparation. Setting the foundation for a future in which she could access whatever she wanted with minimal friction. And my inheritance had simply accelerated her timeline. But she had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the daughter of a woman who once audited her own grocery receipts for errors. She underestimated decades of discipline. She underestimated my memory, my resilience, and my ability to follow a trail. I realized then that revenge, my kind of revenge, would not be loud. It would not be angry. It would be quiet, meticulous, and unshakable. A simple return to truth. So I opened a new notebook. First page. First line. Lorraine's inheritance. Investigation. I listed every detail I remembered from the weeks leading up to the transfer. Every comment. Every inconsistency. Every moment that now rang false. Because I wasn't just going to uncover what Julia did. I was going to undo it. And I was going to do it in a way she would never see coming. What does Margaret discover first when she begins her investigation? I began with the bank. Though embarrassed, I walked in with my head held high, armed with notes, timestamps, and a quiet determination. The branch manager, a woman named Rebecca with warm eyes and a cautious tone, invited me into her office. "How can we help you today, Mrs. Delaney?" I placed my folder on her desk. Someone forged my signature and emptied my inheritance account. That got her attention immediately. "I understand," she said softly. "Let's go through everything." She pulled up the transfer records. 18 transactions. 5 weeks. Each labeled, Family Renovation Initiative. Then she opened the scanned authorization form. There it was. A shaky imitation of my signature. Similar enough to fool someone who didn't know me. But not similar enough to fool me. Next to it was a notary stamp I had never seen before. Name: Chloe Merritt. "Do you know this notary?" Rebecca asked. "No," I replied firmly. The timestamp: Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. That day, I was at an ophthalmology appointment. I still had the printed summary. I always saved my medical papers. I slid the document across the desk. I was here when that form was supposedly notarized. Rebecca exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Delaney, this appears to be serious fraud." I nodded. "I need everything. The audit trail, login data, IP addresses, and all scanned documents." She promised to have the full packet ready within 2 business days. Next, I visited the county recorder's office. Something Julia said earlier had gnawed at me. It'll increase the home value for all of us. Why would she say all of us unless she believed I had a stake? The clerk, a man in his 40s with a forgetful air, looked up the property records. And my heart sank. "Looks like the deed was modified," he said casually. "Last month. Ownership reclassified into a multi-party investment structure." "Who are the listed parties?" I asked, already bracing myself. He turned the monitor. My name. Ethan's name. Julia's name. Filed without my consent. My breath hardened. What legal basis did they use? "Says here," he said, scrolling, "the investment contribution came from you. So the adjustment reflected that." A lie constructed to look like benevolence. I requested certified copies of everything. Then I looked up the notary, Chloe Merritt. Within 2 minutes of searching online, I found photos of her and Julia sipping champagne at brunch, posing at a spa, celebrating a birthday. Friends. Close friends. And the forgery began to crystallize into something undeniable. Julia orchestrated everything. I took all the documents home, placed them neatly into my binder, and brewed a pot of tea. It steadied my hands. This was no longer about emotion. This was about facts. That evening, I called an old acquaintance, my late husband's former attorney, now retired but still sharp as ever. He referred me to a colleague, attorney Helena Whitmore, whom he described as razor-bladed intelligence in pearls. I liked her already. I made an appointment for the next morning. Because now I had evidence. Soon, I would have a plan. And soon after that, I would have justice. What will Helena uncover when she reviews Margaret's evidence? Attorney Helena Whitmore had silver hair pulled tightly into a low twist and an expression that suggested she had absolutely no patience for nonsense. She listened with remarkable focus as I laid out every document, every email, every suspicious detail. When I finished, she tapped her pen lightly on the table. "Mrs. Delaney," she said, "what your daughter-in-law did constitutes multiple crimes. Forgery, fraud, unlawful transfer of funds, and falsification of property records." Hearing it out loud made the air shift. "What can be done?" I asked quietly. Helena's eyes sharpened. "Quite a lot. But let's start with what we know." She pointed to the fake authorization form. "This signature won't stand up under analysis. Not even close." Next, she flipped to the notary stamp. "And this? A notary who is a close friend of the beneficiary? That's a violation of notary ethics standards." Then the property deed. "The reclassification is built on fraudulent documentation. It will be voided." A knot loosened in my chest. She continued, "Legally, the renovations funded by your inheritance make you the sole financial investor. The home value increase is attributable to your funds alone." I blinked. "What does that mean?" Helena sat back. "It means if we choose to pursue it, the home can be legally placed under your sole name until restitution is completed." I stared at her, stunned. She nodded. "And that would be entirely justifiable under Tennessee law given the fraudulent origin of the investment." A slow, steady calm washed over me. Not vengeance. Not triumph. Just truth. Helena gathered the documents in a neat stack. "We'll start with 3 steps. Immediate filing to freeze property modification rights. No further changes could be made to the deed. Fraud report to the bank with supporting evidence. This would trigger an internal investigation. A legal notice to Ethan and Julia notifying them of the fraudulent activity and the upcoming legal remedies." But Helena placed a gentle hand on mine. "Before we file anything, I need to ask. Do you want law enforcement involved? Or do you want to pursue civil remedies quietly?" I took a long breath. "I don't want to destroy my son," I said. "But I need accountability. And I need my inheritance back." She nodded. "Then we proceed discreetly, ethically, legally, calmly." It was exactly what I wanted. Over the next week, Helena worked with breathtaking efficiency. She uncovered even more. Transfers made from an IP address registered to Julia's workplace are emails traced to an alias account set up just 2 days before the transfer or a contractor invoice paid with my funds listing Julia as the primary investment partner, or a message from Julia to the notary reading, "Please handle this quickly. Margaret agreed but can't come in person." Helena had it all compiled in a single, devastating packet. "This," she said, sliding it across the table on the 7th day, "is your truth." I studied it. Each page was a piece of my stolen trust. Each detail a quiet betrayal. But instead of heartbreak, I felt clarity. I had everything I needed to confront them. Calm. Prepared. Untouchable. How will Margaret confront Ethan and Julia? I scheduled the meeting at their home, a neutral battlefield, yet in some ways the center of the storm. Julia opened the door with a bright smile that faltered the moment she saw the binder tucked under my arm. Ethan looked uneasy. Julia looked threatened. Good. We sat in their living room. I placed the binder on the coffee table and rested my hands on it. "I'd like to go through something with you," I said. Julia crossed her legs, the picture of practiced confidence. Margaret, if this is about the renovations, it's about the theft of my inheritance, I said gently. Silence fell like a stone. I opened the binder to the forged signature. This isn't mine. Julia's lips parted. Of course it is. I turned the page. My medical appointment slip from the exact date and time of the supposed notarization. Her jaw tightened. Next page. The notary's photo with Julia at a spa. More photos at brunch. Birthdays. Events. Julia's face drained of color. Ethan's brow furrowed. Julia, why is your friend the notary? But I didn't stop. Next page. Evidence of the alias email used to impersonate me. The contractor invoice listing Julia as the primary investor. IP logs. Timestamps. Every lie laid bare. This, I said quietly, is fraud. Deliberate, coordinated fraud. You took my inheritance without my consent. Ethan's face paled. Julia, tell me you didn't do this. She finally broke. I did it for us. For the family. For our future. She wasn't using the money. I raised a hand. Controlled. That money was for my medical care, my home, and my future. And it was my sister's final gift. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Julia spoke again, voice cracking. You could have lived with us. We were building a suite for you. This was for everyone. It wasn't for me, I said. It was for control. Then I outlined the consequences, measured and clear. The forged deed would be reversed. The house, due to the fraudulent investment, would be placed under my sole name until restitution was complete. A restitution plan would be drafted for repayment of the full $310,000. If they refused, law enforcement would be notified. Ethan stared at Julia with betrayal etched across his face. You told me she agreed. You told me she signed everything. Julia's voice grew small. I thought it was best. No, Ethan whispered. You thought we could get away with it. I closed the binder. I'm not here to destroy either of you. But the truth will be acknowledged. And the consequences will be real. Julia blinked hard, tears forming. But I did not mistake this for remorse. It was fear. Fear of consequences she never expected. I stood. This is not anger. This is accountability. And with that, I left their house. Steady. The truth had spoken. What happens after the confrontation? The aftermath unfolded like a slow, inevitable tide. Attorney Helena filed the deed reversal with precision. Because the renovations were funded entirely by my inheritance, and because the investment was made under fraudulent circumstances, the county restored ownership solely under my name. The home was, legally, mine. Next, the bank completed its investigation. The forged signature, conflicting IP addresses, and false email account were enough to trigger disciplinary action against the notary. She lost her commission. Julia was barred from managing joint accounts for the duration of restitution. Ethan signed the repayment plan without hesitation. He was devastated, not by the legal ramifications, but by the betrayal in his own home. He visited me often, quietly, apologetically. Julia moved out for several weeks. Wordlessly. With a suitcase and a look I couldn't entirely read. Shame. Anger. Fear. Probably all three. Neighbors whispered. Family murmured. But I stayed silent. I didn't need to defend my actions. The truth was unshakable. And the most ironic part? Every upgrade Julia fought for, every countertop, every wall, every tile, now legally belonged to me. The house increased in value significantly. A blessing I never wanted, but now had. Eventually, Ethan asked Julia to attend counseling with him. Whether their marriage would recover remained uncertain. As for the restitution plan, it would take years. I didn't mind. I wasn't desperate for the money. I simply needed the principle restored. The dignity. The power of truth acknowledged. Friends asked me if I felt victorious. I didn't. I felt balanced. Centered. At peace. The scales had been corrected. The truth had been honored. The deception had been dismantled. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was justice fueled by clarity. What final wisdom will Margaret share after everything she's endured? Now, months later, I sit on my porch overlooking the quiet street. The evening breeze rustles the leaves. The world feels steady again. What happened changed me. Not in the way betrayal often does. Not hardened, not bitter. Just awakened. A reminder that trust is precious, boundaries are vital, and documentation matters more than politeness. I learned that even in our later years, we must remain guardians of our own lives. Because manipulation doesn't strike loudly. It whispers. It creeps. It arrives in small, seemingly harmless suggestions. And sometimes, the people who smile warmly at you are the same ones who quietly rewrite your future without your consent. But I also learned something more powerful. Truth, when handled with patience and documentation, can restore what deception steals. I regained my inheritance in a different form, a home now under my name, improved by someone else's greed. I regained my peace. I regained my sense of agency. Ethan and I are healing. Slowly. Carefully. I hold no anger toward him. Love allows space for growth, for accountability, for rebuilding. Julia. Well, only time will reveal the woman she chooses to become after this. As for me, I'm stronger. Not harder. Not colder. Just stronger. And I share my story because I know, deeply, that I am not the only one who has faced quiet betrayal in their later years. Many people lose their voice when they feel outmaneuvered, overlooked, dismissed. So hear me clearly. You are never too old to protect what is yours. You are never too small to stand against manipulation. And you are never powerless when you stand firmly in truth. Thank you for listening. And if this story resonated, I'd love to hear what you would have done in my place. Because in the end, our stories strengthen each other. And sometimes, the calmest voice delivers the deepest justice.